Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. The modern release I want to look at today is The Last of Us Part 2 from Naughty Dog. And I'm going to be doing a full defense of this game, which means full spoilers, so this is your warning if you have not played the game. It is on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 with the remastered version, and if you haven't played the game yet, I highly recommend you go and do so because it is one of my favorite video games. It was on my top 10 for top 10 PlayStation 4 games of all time. I believe it was in my top 3, possibly top 4. Now I'm thinking about it, I think it was top 3 though. This game is phenomenal in so many regards, and I want to give a defense as to why I think this is the case. There was a lot of vitriol concerning the game with all the leaks coming out before the game launched, and then there was a lot of negativity after the game had launched. So I want to talk about what makes this game so special and why most people are wrong about it. The biggest thing that people criticize about this game is that it feels like a poor revenge story, and that revenge stories are kind of boring because they just, I don't know, they just kind of suck. Apparently the original game was supposed to have some kind of revenge arc, but they ultimately scrapped that because they didn't think it was that good of an idea. And what makes The Last of Us Part 2 so special is that it is not a revenge story. It is showing how how cyclical revenge is and how awful it is with all the collateral damage that happens around it. It's showing off the impact of pursuing revenge and being selfish. And I love that about it, and it has so many wonderful things that if you just go into this game thinking this is just a boring revenge story, you're going to miss out on one of the most impactful video games of all time. One of the most special stories ever told in video games. And it is very brutal from start to finish. First and foremost, they have made this more realistic than The Last of Us Part 1, which is kind of crazy to think about because some of those death animations and the way that you kill humans and the zombie enemies is pretty what's the word I'm looking for? It's pretty disturbing. They made it even more disturbing The Last of Us Part 2, and they did this on purpose because they want everything to feel very weighty. Every person you kill, you feel it. And it is pretty devastating because some of the people that you kill, some of the cutscenes that you have with them, it's pretty jarring. It's hard to watch at times. They made this as brutal and horrible as possible. Now, for this campaign, you're split up into two parts. You play as Ellie for the first half, who is avenging Joel, who was killed by Abby early on into the game. You play as Joel for a big chunk of the prologue, but then Abby, who has been looking to kill Joel for a while now because he killed her dad at the end of part 1, who is the doctor about to operate on Ellie, she kills him early on, which made a lot of people mad because they wanted to play as Joel, their favorite character, for a big chunk of the game, and the marketing I think led up to it. Looked like you were going to be playing as Joel for a big chunk, but they did this on purpose. Obviously, they didn't want you to know that Joel was going to die. And while I understand the sadness that Joel is dead, this is the device that they use to tell a better story. You have lots of flashbacks as you play as Ellie, with like moments with Joel and the kind of rift between them since the end of The Last of Us Part 1. They've been living for several years. She's much more grown up at this point. And you get to see, as you progress throughout the game, the connection that Ellie had with Joel despite the problems that they had with each other, and her regret for not mending things earlier before he was actually killed. They kill him in front of her eyes too, and leave her alive because they were just looking to kill Joel. So she goes on a crusade at Tommy's request as well. They're both very upset about this. Tommy was also there and doesn't get killed but gets beat up pretty bad, and she goes after her. She goes after goes after Abby to go and kill her. But the latter half of the game, where you play as Abby, you get to see her side of things and understand what drives her forward. It gives you a more compassionate outlook on the antagonist of the game because you're forced to make her the protagonist for a very long time. This more than doubles the length of the original campaign, so you have a huge chunk of time to recognize what makes Abby Abby and why she is the way that she is. And again, every single decision that both characters make throughout this game show how revenge impacts the people around them specifically. Now, I talked about how brutal this game is. They kept all of the mechanics that made the game the original game so good. You still have the stealth. They've upgraded it in a lot of ways. You can crawl through the grass. They have dogs that will sniff you out. You have different traps that you can set this time around. There's a lot more nuance to the combat. It's otherwise fairly similar in terms of what you can do. Abby and Ellie use different weapons. Abby comes from like a more military focused encampment, so she has more heavy armaments. Ellie has what you'd normally expect. She utilizes the bow and arrow more and more stealthy things for sure. And it's really cool to see the difference between the two and how they survive in this very hopeless world that they go through. It really shows that the progression between part 1 and part 2, even just like 5 years or so, is not progressed the world very much. There's still lots of people struggling for survival and doing whatever they need to do to keep the other people out. They're just focused on saving their own people and leaving the rest of the world out to dry. It's pretty incredible how they were able to follow up on The Last of Us Part 1. I was really concerned about it because I thought Part 1 ended so perfectly, very ambiguous, wasn't sure what they were going to do. But the story that they tell and the revenge arc for both of these characters is very, very poignant. Now, again, I plan on doing full spoilers here, so if you're worried about that, then exit out now, because this game is phenomenal. I want you to experience it yourself. So as you progress through Ellie's story, you find lots of Abby's friends. You'll go through all sorts of hell to get to Abby. And as you're following the trail, you will encounter lots of her friends, and a lot of them are executed when you get to them. You kill a lot of her friends, usually without knowing it, but the more that you uncover, the more that you go back and forth. Like once you do Ellie's side of the story and you do Abby's side, it kind of like does like a backpedal, and you get to start where Abby left off killing Joel and how she deals with everything. You get to see all the people that you impacted as Ellie killing, trying to get to Abby. And you get to see from Abby's perspective all of the people that she loves die because she had to go on her crusade of revenge to kill Joel. So it shows the kind of the consequences from both sides of both angles here. You get to see Abby's regret as a lot of the people that she loves and cares for die because of her drive to kill someone that she felt like needed to die. And on the flip side, Ellie gets to see a lot of her friends die because of her choices as well. When they finally intersect, when the two come together, because at the end of Ellie's part of the campaign that you play, you are confronted with Abby. You guys finally meet up, and then you play as Abby for another 12, 14 hours to get her side of the story, and then you get back to fighting each other. And it's a very crazy, tumultuous thing to have happen. And once you get to that point, Abby gets when you finish Abby's side of the story, she actually spares Ellie. Despite all of the people that Ellie killed to get here, she recognizes at this point that she needs to stop this cycle of violence and revenge because it's not going to do anything good. She gives Ellie the chance to live. And part of that comes from a big chunk of the campaign where she actually helps several kids, a couple of kids that are being trapped by this very crazy cult. It's an insane side story that I saw it in the previews and everything. They had some promotional material where you could see it. It looks pretty horrifying, and it absolutely was. But I didn't really expect Abby to be such an integral part of this, saving a couple of children. Kind of shows that she is growing and progressing. She recognizes that there are more important things than her own agenda, and that helping other people can be something special, something that she can do. And that's something that Ellie used to have. She used to have that inside of her. When in the part 1 especially, she really wants to reach out and help as many people as possible. But now that her mentor and her father figure has died, she has devolved into something that Abby was at the beginning of part 2. It's a crazy push and pull back and forth throughout the entirety of the game. When Abby finally ultimately decides to spare Ellie, it's a really beautiful moment because so many people have died on both sides, and she still decides, you know what, this is not worth it. And it's a wonderful thing to see. Unfortunately for Ellie, once she goes back home, empty-handed with a lot of the people that she went with ended up dying, she comes back home to settle down. She has a life with her girlfriend, and they're raising a child at this point. And she keeps having these awful flashbacks and these visions in her brain that she can't get out. And she decides that she's going to continue her crusade. And her girlfriend says, you know what? If you do that, when you come back, we won't be here. That's the choice you're going to have to make. And Ellie ultimately decides to go, despite all of that. And she gets captured. She frees herself. She pushes herself toward the end as much as possible. When she's finally confronted with Abby once more, Abby is a shell of her former self. She has been tortured and starved to death. She is very thin. And the early parts of the game, Abby is incredibly muscular. She clearly is a military person at this point. She clearly has the combat experience. And when you finally get to her here, she is emaciated, incredibly thin, on the verge of dying, and Ellie gets her down, and Abby immediately goes to one of the kids that she was with to try and save him, and Ellie tells her that she's not leaving and that they're going to fight it out. And what happens at the very end of this game is the most brutal and horrible thing I've ever had to witness in a game, probably. I remember doing this little fight with her where Abby says, okay, I'm going to fight for this person. I don't have it in me, but I'm going to do it anyway. And the fight is awful. They're both on the verge of like, Abby's definitely on the verge of death. Ellie's not too far behind. She's been through a ton just to get here. They go at each other, forcing you to pull the punches here and fight out this fight. And Ellie ultimately holds Abby underwater, drowning her, and it's a pretty horrific thing to watch. And the whole time you see like sparks of a flashback and something's trying to happen. She finally sees something in her mind. A memory unlocks for her with her and Joel, and she lets go of Abby. Abby comes up gasping for breath. I remember sobbing, breaking down, crying at this point. And Ellie finally lets her go and tells her to leave, and she does, and she saves the child that she was trying to save and finally gets away. Ellie finally lets go after all of this violence, after all of this cruelty, and you have this beautiful memory with her and Joel where things were okay, where Joel kind of admits to her that what he did was all for her, and he did do those things that he lied about, that he saved her, and that he'd go and do it again in a heartbeat. And it's a really beautiful, poignant moment there, because this is something that already happened to Ellie. This is a flashback before Joel died, before everything went to hell in a handbasket. She knew this, and either she repressed it or she just did not remember until this moment. But it was a great moment of reconciliation for them. And I think she had trouble accepting that, and that's why they never mended things fully, because she was still grappling with the fact that humanity had a chance to be saved, and Joel still took that away from everybody. She still took that choice away from Ellie. But she knows that he loved her. And if that hadn't worked and Ellie had died, then it would have all been for nothing. And she remembers this. It's a really beautiful thing. And she returns home only to find that everyone's gone, that she doesn't have a home to return to. She lost a couple of fingers along the way, the fingers that she used to play the guitar at the very end of the game. She goes to play the guitar like she used to, but some of the notes don't sound the same because her fingers are missing. And it's a very nice and dismal reminder that things aren't going to be the same, because she chose to keep pushing down this path. She had a choice to get out. She had a chance, but she let it go. I expect part 3 to be even crazier. I expect them to make a part 3. I'm sure they're working on it right now. But the way part 2 left off is pretty crazy. And part 2 does something that part 1 doesn't really do. It adds so much depth to the other side. So the Fireflies are an organization that you just get to learn about through context clues in part 1. And you kind of glean what their organization is about. They're all about trying to help people, but they also have their own selfish interests, but primarily they're trying to be a resistance to the tyrannical side of the government that they have. And in part 2, you get to kind of see what the organization does and see how everything that happened in part 1 impacted the organization, how it tore a lot of things down and really took away so much from so many people, so much hope from an organization that was just trying to help. And it's just beautiful how they expanded the world and gave us so much more and offered a really brutal take, making, again, every single kill that you have in this game feel exceptionally hard to do. So by the time that you get to the end of it and you realize how many people you've killed, it's pretty harrowing, and you recognize that, wow, this could have all been avoided had we just not gone after the people that we hated. If we had just been okay with being with the people that we loved, and let go of the harsh reality of the world that everybody's looking out for themselves and doing the best that they can. It's a pretty cool thing. So this game, I wouldn't say is a revenge story. It's a showing that revenge is pointless. In fact, not only pointless, but really damaging, can really do so much bad. And that's a great thing. It's a really cool thing to experience. And this game, despite how hard it is, how brutal it is, tells a really beautiful and poignant story. And it's something that makes me excited for part 3, because I hope we have some kind of positive resolution for this story. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but it looks like we're maybe going toward that. So I think part 2 is an absolute masterpiece. I'm going to give this an easy platinum rank. And if you haven't played it, you should do yourself a service and actually go try it out. If you've heard a lot of negative press, if you've been concerned about it in any way, I promise you that if you liked part 1, you will almost certainly like part 2. I have not met a person that has played part 2 from start to finish that hasn't thoroughly enjoyed it. And the biggest comment I always get after people have played it, after I've recommended it to them, is that, what were people so upset about? Why did people not like this game? It's probably because they didn't play it or didn't get it. So go out and check it out. I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.